Good morning, everyone. My name is Shane Misuro, and this is my personal introduction statement for educational leadership. I live in Philadelphia, and I teach in a suburb outside of Philadelphia, a very large high school that is North Penn High School. North Penn High School is a 3,000 student high school for grades 10 through 12. I have taught for 13 years, and in those 13 years, I've taught biology, chemistry, but I mainly teach now marine science and botany, two classes that I've designed. I live with my wife and two kids in Philadelphia. My daughter is in that picture. Her name is Nora. She's 2 years old. She likes white chocolate, and she also likes Frozen, the movie. I can summate now the entire plot line for both Frozen 1 and Frozen 2. I'm very proud of that because it took me about 48 viewings to figure out what the plot is of Frozen 2 because I wasn't paying very much attention. My son, who isn't pictured in there, his name is Jonah. He likes all things trucks and heavy equipment and transit and that sort of thing. He is 4 years old. The biggest challenge for me to teaching in the pandemic is adapting the courses that I teach to the way in which we're teaching right now. As you would imagine, botany and marine science have a pretty big hands-on component. As part of botany, I manage a 200 square foot greenhouse. Sorry, 200 square foot industrial greenhouse. It's not part of marine science. We manage and take care of and do labs on about 1,000 gallons of freshwater and saltwater tanks, and none of that can be done virtually. And so I've had to take effectively 70% of the course and throw it away and figure out how to take 30% of the course and expand it out. And that was a very difficult concept and a very difficult thing for me to do and figure out how to do well. I'm still truthfully trying to figure it out. But we're all doing the best we can with what we can, with what we have. Something I learned about myself in the pandemic was my need for social interaction from other people. As a botanist and a marine scientist, these aren't traits for people that generally consider themselves social butterflies. I was always sort of a loner and didn't really super enjoy interacting with other people. I was always very comfortable with myself and my alone time, and I even required alone time a lot of the times to get my thoughts in order. But I realized that even though I do need that part of my life, I also have a small but necessary part of my life where I need interaction with people that aren't my direct family, and that I start to go stir crazy when I only interact with the same people over and over again, namely my family. I thought talking to my plants was going to be enough, and it turns out it wasn't. So there you go. In terms of the mindsets of effective educators that I was asked to reflect on, the one that popped out to me was the mindset that happiness was a choice. I don't agree with that, and I think that's actually sort of a little bit of a reductive statement to say about happiness. I do believe that you can't be happy unless you choose to be so, that I don't believe that the only thing you need to do to be happy is choose to be happy. I think when you say that, you reduce the entire study and trade of therapy down to someone just encouraging you to choose to be happy over and over and over again. I think it's simplistic and reductive to say that the only reason unhappy people are unhappy is because they're not choosing to be so, and actually a little bit dangerous because I think it discounts the emotional validity of an entire population of people. In terms of the dispositions, the one that I wanted to focus on and that I focused on to critique was a learner. And that's because more focused on the idea that a effective educator is a lifelong learner and reads current research. And I thought that that's good to read research, but it's much more important for me, and in my experience is 13 years, that aside from research, administrators be open to learning from their subordinates, meaning teachers, and their subordinates, meaning students. I often find that administrators take a position that they are administrators and therefore they know better than teachers that are trying to coach them, or students even that are trying to coach them. And I think the most effective educators are open to learning not just from research, but also from their peers and subordinates below them. And in fact, that those lessons are actually the most important in terms of being effective. In terms of the practices of an effective educator, the one I focused on in terms of critiquing was examining feedback and data. And specifically, I wanted to focus on the idea that when examining feedback and data, effective administrators need to be open to the idea that the data may be pointing in something that was not their immediate viewpoint. That the data may suggest something that is not their immediate assumption. So often I see administrators selectively review data that just validates their viewpoint and disregard data that does not. And it's pretty disingenuous, and it leads to a lot of really awkward meetings where teachers are just kind of left saying the same thing over and over again, and then we all go home. So I think examining data and feedback is very important, but I think examining it with an open mind and a willingness to accept the fact that what your initial assumptions were incorrect according to the data is even more important. Last but certainly not least, the principle that I thought was most stuck out to me was the idea of public interests ahead of self. People that are promoted to administration, I often find are people who do have the public interest ahead of themselves. They say they want to go into administration to create a better educational experience, et cetera, but quite often what these administrators end up doing is self-promoting. They end up switching their goals from doing policies that are in the best interest of the schools and students and teachers to doing policies that are into the best interest of schools, administrators, and schools administrators, as long as it advances their own public interest in their own self-image. I think that the idea of putting others ahead of yourself and your own image would create a scenario where you're much more likely to sacrifice for better policies and more effective policies, even when they go against your own particular advancement. So, in just an overall summation of critique, I believe that happiness isn't a choice. I believe that administrators have to be open to and considerate of advice and critique, from both teachers and students, as well as open to research from abroad. That effective administrators have to remain open to data that goes against their preconceived notion, and that effective school administrators put others' interests ahead of themselves, even when that means their own even when that means that they politically or their own image is taking steps back. Overall, I agree with the mindsets and dispositions and critiques and practices. I think really the main linchpin, if you take all these together, the main thing that determines a effective administrator are these mindsets, these dispositions, these practices, these principles. I think these are all characteristics of an effective administrator. But I think the biggest hindrance of that is not someone that doesn't have these mindsets. It's the breeding process of how we get administrators. At least in Pennsylvania, you only need 3 years of teaching experience in order to become a school administrator, which means that we have school administrators that are in charge of me that have 3 years teaching experience as opposed to classroom experience, as opposed to my 13 years of classroom experience, and that are 10 years younger than me, but in a position over me. And that necessarily in and of itself isn't a problem, but when that administrator decides to disregard my 13 years of experience and my saying that what they're saying isn't going to work for the following reasons or will work for the following reasons based on the fact that they are an administrator, that becomes a problem. I think a potential solution to this, and a very interesting solution to this, is simply to require administrators to teach still, even though they're administrators. If you say you become an administrator, you don't have to be a teacher anymore, you create an opening for someone that wasn't a very good teacher to advance in the trade. If you say only teachers, if you say even when you become an administrator, you just get more work, you need to also still teach a class, you eliminate that idea of a person just mindlessly advancing through in order for the sake of advancement. In other words, I think it's necessary to have educational leaders that can change with the time, can create adapting and effective policies and procedures that shape and guide more successful teachers, and that most importantly, can lead through their own experience and example, not just from what they say. We were asked also to reflect on the standard stated in terms of a standard correlation, a relevant statement, and a reflection statement. The standard stated was to reflect on, communicate, cultivate, and model professional dispositions and norms that support educational success, well-being of each student. So, in terms of the correlation in this assessment, I was required to reflect on those professional dispositions, norms, of effective administrators. It was relevant because by characterizing and critiquing these mindsets, dispositions, practices, etc., I improved my understanding of them. By putting them in a box, I was able to define them better and identify them better in terms of which ones are necessary, which ones I agree with, and which ones I did not agree with, which was essentially my reflection. My references were the Lynch and Moore articles, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is my reflection. I hope you enjoyed it, and smash that subscribe button, and have a nice